To our horror, the pack had already shifted, and the way we'd come had disappeared. So now we needed to head south, and when we reached the end of the pack, turn right, and then go to land. But that right-hand turning could be in half an hour, 2 hours, 20 hours, or never. We had no idea. And then to make it worse, this thick fog completely enveloped us, and everything turned grey. The sea turned grey, the ice turned grey, the sky turned grey, and it became utterly impossible to gauge distances. And time again, we'd come around a right-hand corner, and I'd see cliffs 2-3 miles away, no ice between me and the cliffs, and I'd think, we've done it, our salvation is at hand, we can make it to shore. Then my eyes would focus, the fog would clear, I realized there weren't cliffs, they weren't even 2 or 3 miles away, maybe a piece of ice just this big, 20, 30 meters away. So utterly bamboozling. And then I came around one corner, and I saw this big piece of ice with 10 polar bears on it. I'd never seen a polar bear in my life. I didn't know they traveled in packs, and now I'm faced with 10 of them, about 300 meters away. I'm about to shout to my teammates, polar bears, polar bears. Then my eyes focus, the fog clears, and I realize they're not polar bears, they're seagulls. And they're about 6 meters away from me. And as soon as I could see that they were seagulls, I couldn't compute how my brain had thought they were anything but that. It was so confusing. And on and on and on we paddled, till finally we made it back to the fast ice, not land, but at least fast ice. But even then we didn't know we had, because it was so grey, until we saw a little tent, some Inuit hunting at the floe edge. We shouted to them, and they came out of their tent confused about we just appeared out of the fog, and they threw us a rope and they pulled us up, and up until that point we'd been stoic and resilient and quiet. But now our salvation had suddenly appeared out of the fog. We sort of had verbal diarrhea. We've been kayaking the Northwest Passage, and there was seagulls and polar bears, and now we're trying to get back to can you help us? And they saw they had a skidoo. Can you skidoo us across to the cabins? The cabins are over there. And they were just completely taken aback. And there's an elder gentleman sitting on a bag in the middle. And they all turned to him. And clearly the focus is on him now. He's in charge. What he says next determines our fate. He takes a long draw of a cigarette like a Western movie. Now, floe edge is a dangerous place. If you don't know what you're doing, you shouldn't be here. All the younger men turn back to us and shrug. You're getting no help here. And reluctant to go back into the water, we tied the kayaks around our waists and began to walk off into the fog, hoping to get over the fast ice back to the cabins. Just before we disappear into the fog, a younger man runs up to us and says, hey guys, if you're going to do this, listen to me. White ice, blue ice, you can stand on it. Black ice, do not stand on it. So with his advice ringing in our ears, we continued on. And after a while, we started following some polar bear footprints, which might sound like a bad idea, and if we caught up with the polar bear, it would have been a bad idea. But we reasoned that a polar bear is very experienced on ice, it's much heavier than us, anything it stands on, we can stand on. And he went in an incredibly straight line for a very long time. And at one point, it just took sort of a 5-10 meter detour to the left. We cut across the detour. And just as we were doing so, I thought, I wonder why I went over there. Maybe it heard something, maybe it smelled something. Crack! The ice gave way below me. I fell through the ice and just caught myself with my elbows before I disappeared. The others ran over. I said, don't come, you'll fall in too. So they nosed the kayak towards me, held onto the front, and they pulled me out. We turned around to look where I'd fallen through a big circle of black ice. And we said, what was it the Inuit guy said about black ice? All we could do was laugh it off and keep going. And after 14 hours, we finally made it back to the cabins. And that final bit of sea ice had been crumpled against the shore, and the sun began to break through the fog, and it was beautiful and ethereal. We made it back to the cabins. We made 0 miles after 14 hours of life and death fighting. And you know, that could have been crippling and triggered all of these emotions that I'd had before. But as soon as we got into the cabin, Eileen turned to us and went, we are explorers! And everybody just dived into this big hug because we were so excited by the adventure that we had, even though we'd made 0 miles. And you might also be wondering, how come Mark is kayaking the ice-free Northwest Passage, and on his first night, he's completely repelled by ice? Well, ice-free, even the term, technically means an area of 15% sea ice or less, which means as the Arctic opens up and all these shipping routes become available to commercial ships, even they might need icebreakers. And a lot of icebreakers, particularly Chinese icebreakers, are actually military boats. So if you imagine a scenario where a commercial boat's taking a shortcut to Europe, it's being escorted by a military vessel past the tip of Canada, out via Greenland, you begin to understand why it's so interesting to America to try and extend its Arctic coastline.